Really appreciate you guys being here. Goal is to have you in and out from the masterclass in about 30 minutes. I am going to go through a ton of content pretty quickly, and I will be sticking around for questions as well at the end. So feel free, if you want to hang on longer, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I will, periodically check in with you guys and try to answer some questions in the chat if they come up too. So kind of quick segue. I know a lot of you guys, most of us are connected on LinkedIn, and I've got a couple members of my team here as well to help me moderate, work through tech, let people in, things like that. So I'm gonna switch into screen share mode. So today's masterclass, Facebook ad creative testing, how to win your testing and scale post iOS. This is the new iOS edition. And we're going to get right into the good stuff. No fluff. Quick intro about me. Hey, I'm Will Perry. I'm the founder of Elite Media Buyers Academy and Reason Media. I've got 15 years experience in digital marketing, and my girlfriend and I are doing the nomad life right now, which has been pretty awesome. We are in Asheville, North Carolina right now. We took this photo the last week when we were playing some disc golf in the Pisgah Forest. I love the outdoors. I love the outdoors, and I'm happy to be here. I'm not sure whose audio that is in the background, but happy to be here with you guys today, and really looking forward to sharing a bunch of strategies that honestly, like, we're still crushing Facebook ads with. So right out of the gate, gonna hit you with the proof, show the proof. Here's one specific client. Remember, we've got agency side, we've got Elite Media Buyers Academy side. Here's a case study where we generated $2.2 million in profit for this client. They've scaled very aggressively in the last 14, 15 months. Would not have been able to do this without the strategies I'm going to share with you today. At our current highest daily spend, $18,000 a day, again on Facebook, full transparency, April 16th, 2022. I'm going to go through this 4-phased system with you guys today as well. We should break 500K on this account this month. We run millions in spend. I consult on millions of other spend personally and with our coaches in Elite Media Buyers Academy. So if you are an agency owner, a media buyer, a director of marketing, a VP of marketing, a CMO at an internal brand, and you simply are still looking to improve your approach with your Facebook ads, scale and go broad, you're in the right place. I'm literally going to tell you exactly how to do it today, getting directly into the good stuff. So right out of the gate, the argument is, overall post iOS, you guys need to take away control from the algorithm. That is sort of like the overlying theme of what I'm going to teach you guys today, is exactly how to do that. Starting with these 8 specific keys. Now, again, as long as you guys are willing to stay on today, I'm going to go through all of these in specific detail, but these 8 specific keys that are going to help you win your creative testing on Facebook right now, scale, even reduce customer acquisition costs. Like, we're reducing CAC as much as 49 and 50% still to this day on Facebook, and scaling to $5, $10, $15,000 a day and more on Facebook, and still doing it very well. Now, one thing that I will sort of like give as a disclaimer, if you will, is this is assuming that you've been proactive with fixing your tracking and are using Heroes or Wicked reports, and or you are pulling in offline conversions with Zapier and through Shopify, for example. If you have no idea what I'm talking about with offline conversions, follow up with me afterwards. I've got trainings on that, but I'm assuming today, disclaimer, that you've been proactive. On my side, as a fellow media buyer, I almost require everybody to have a third-party attribution software these days. Full transparency, I am a Hyros affiliate. I became an affiliate because I was a fanboy and I started to see things work pretty significantly. The idea is not to promote heroes. The idea is that like I prefer heroes, and that's what I use on my ad accounts. So the 8 keys to winning your creative testing post iOS and scaling your ad accounts again, sometimes even faster or more than you were before. Number 1, ad variable isolation. This is a very specific approach that that I teach media buyers and that we use internally on accounts for our clients. Number 2, use a repeatable testing system. The testing system that we've developed is what we call SVSD testing and scaling system. Again, I'm going to go through all of these in details with benefits, why, how to do it, examples, etc. Number 3, use message-driven targeting. Most of us probably know that detailed targeting has gone away, or I should really say a lot of niche targeting has really gone away on Facebook. And so this is one of my favorite pieces to teach and to talk about, which is message-driven targeting. And Jack, on my team, I know that this is your favorite as well. And so I'll go into that in more specific detail. Number 4, sticking to the winning ad formula. This is the 80-20 principle, a mental model. I'll go through that in specific detail. 5, 6, 7, and 8, increasing your message testing volume, prioritizing your hook, using your best audience only, and kill ad sets early. If anybody has any questions as I'm going through this as well, feel free to drop these into the chat because I will try to answer each one of these questions as I'm going through this as well. I know this is like a lunchtime lunch and learn, right here. So I am going to be a little bit rapid fire, but I'm happy to stick around, answer anyone's detailed questions, as well as, follow up with, feel free to follow up with me after. Okay, so let's break down ad variable isolation, why to use this, and what exactly it means, and then I'll show you an example. So we can all relate that there's hundreds or thousands of different things that we could potentially consider with our Facebook ad campaigns at any given time, pre-iOS or post-iOS. There are still so many variables, and I'm a big believer that when you minimize variables, that equals clarity. And when you have clarity, that equals confidence as a media buyer. And when you have confidence, that equals scaling. What happened is when this whole iOS thing went down, for example, we all kind of lost confidence in what exactly to do, how to do it, and what next steps to take, right? And so when we have clarity, we have confidence. When we have confidence, we're scaling again. My idea here is let's make scaling easy again. So with ad variable isolation, the idea is to be super disciplined, test one variable at a time, not 2, 3, or 4. And what I'm talking about here is the ad copy, the headline, the hook, the ad creative, the text overlay on the ad creative. And I'm going to show you an exact example of a proper ad variable isolation test so that you can get the clarity that you are looking for, so that you can have confidence in what you are looking at, so that you can scale again. And so the idea here is when you're using ad variable isolation and this methodology with how you are setting up and structuring your ad campaigns with Facebook, you are able to identify if the hook, the headline, the creative image or video, the creative with text overlay, or the audience is exactly 100% what is working. The problem is when we test 2, 3, 4, or multiple things at a time, we lose the ability to have that clear line of sight on what exactly is working. And when we don't know what exactly is working, we kind of revert back to this aspect of like, well, what seems to be working is this mishmash of things, right? And that's not exactly a repeatable framework for creating scale on a consistent basis. And so it's super important to be very disciplined towards this approach. I can honestly tell you that it was probably like 3 or 4 years ago when I finally implemented this for myself as a media buyer. And I can tell you just a little bit quick backstory, like everything that I'm going to share with you today was like to prevent myself from my own self-sabotage as a media buyer. Like I never would have generated the amount of results that I've generated and scaled so many brands and spent millions and generated millions and all of these things as a media buyer if I honestly simply was not structured and disciplined. And so I started creating all of these SOPs for myself to protect myself against myself, right? Like I would go into the ad accounts and I would like just change stuff all the time. And then like a couple days would go by and then I'd change more stuff. And then like a couple days, more days would go by and then I'd change more stuff. Like if, if you've been running ads for a little while, you probably know what I mean with this like constant reactivity day to day, which like there's no scaling from that. Like you can't scale constant change. Like the only thing you can scale is foundation, like systems, processes, like repeatable framework. And so it wasn't until I finally like became super disciplined around this philosophy that I created of ad variable isolation that I finally was like starting to connect the dots of exactly what was working. And then when I knew what was working, I could like repeat it. And then I would start to stack these things on top of each other. And when I started stacking these things on top of each other, that's how I came up with this 4-phase framework. But to go back and give you an example of what ad variable isolation looks like, this is an example of what we call a phase 1 message test. So the benefits of why you would want to use ad variable isolation within your setup is, remember, clarity removes guesswork. And so if you are guessing day to day, like you are reacting, like that is not an elite mastery approach to running media at a very high or effective level. And what I do is I teach intermediate and advanced media buyers how to become masters, with this. And it's about having control over the process, not the process having control over us. And so when we use ad variable isolation, we remove the guesswork day to day because we're being like so laser targeted on exactly what our intent is of what we are trying to produce from our test. And when we know exactly what we are trying to produce from our test, we gain the clarity that we're looking for. And we gain the confidence of like, oh yeah, clearly this is what is working. And I can pinpoint it and I can identify it down to the exact variable. If we remember back to when we were in school, like running scientific experiments, right? Like you'd have a variable and then you'd have a control. And so this is a very scientific approach to an art form. And art like sometimes lacks structure. And I sure as hell know that media buyers lack structure or we wouldn't be here. Love all of you though, like straight up. And so, when we remove this clarity, when we remove this guesswork, we gain the clarity that we're looking for. The other thing is that we can keep winning ads going longer. We're spending less time creating and more time optimizing. Like if you run an agency or you're a media buyer in this agency, or you're even an in-house media buyer, at a brand, et cetera, like, how much creative we've all generated, or not even generated, like developed in the last 12 months, like, right? Like it is absolutely insane when you think about the amount of creative that you are producing, right? It's like probably 50% of it you're not even using. And yet, you're allocating all this time, effort, energy, resources, money, time, dollars, all this stuff into creating, like, which is based on randomness, right? Like, oh, let's try this, let's try that, let's try this, let's try that. And the reason that that happens is we don't have clarity on what exactly is working. And so what I'm a couple steps ahead, skipping ahead, I'm going to teach you what it looks like to stick to the winning ad formula. Because when you stick to the winning ad formula, you focus more on optimizing and your creative output is less on creating and more on editing, which is a hell of a lot easier and faster than creating. And now we are optimizing. And when we are optimizing, we are mastering our media buys versus that process having control over us. And so, you're going to be able to 10x your testing speed and output when you isolate all of these variables, because you can produce 10 times more the amount of headlines, 10 times the amount of more of ad copy, and run this in a controlled environment where you know exactly what is working. So I'm going to go into this example here real quick. This is a client of ours, Sonora Guitar. They sell a high ticket mastery program. You'll see in this example here, it's a call funnel. You'll see in this example here that the only variable in this entire setup is literally the actual ad headline on the actual ad. So the creative headline is what we call it on the actual creative, all the same across all 10 of these variants. The hook of the ad copy, all the same across all 10 of these variants. The call to action button, all the same across all 10 of these variants. The only variable, this is consistent every time. This is the way you will set it up every time. The only variable that you are changing is the actual ad headline in the setup. So when you run this test, I'm not going to go into decision making, how to read the data, et cetera, on this. But when you run this test, you're like, oh yeah, obviously set yourself apart with this one practice routine was my best headline. Now, when I'm detailing in my notes what my winning ad formula is, I have these headlines of like these benefit promise oriented headlines that I can continue to replicate more and more of these and do less and less of what we would call maybe like proclamation headlines or X result in Y time headlines. And you're going to produce more copy messaging that is more clearly resonating with your audience. That's why ad variable isolation is so powerful, because you can go super deep into exactly what is working, and most importantly, why. So let me check and see how I'm doing on time. Well, I honestly spent too much time on that. All right. So key number 2, using a testing system. The reason that you want to use a testing system is that random approach equals random results. From personal experience, both as an agency owner and as a media buyer, I find one of the biggest struggles that I've experienced or witnessed or observed or whatever over the last 5 or 6 years is a lack of standardization on how to run ads effectively. It wasn't until I finally committed to training my team exhaustively at a very intense and deep level that we started to get repeatable results. And so the repeatable way of testing and scaling is how you standardize this whole entire process. And so, the reason why we want that as well is when we're troubleshooting, things are always going to go wrong, but you want to be with your testing system, you want to be able to minimize what could be the problem. So remember, ad variable isolation, I'm going to show you what this 4-phase system looks like. When you can eliminate variables, you can identify exactly what the problem is within your test, and then you don't go kill a bunch of stuff that could actually be working. And it is absolutely nauseating to think about how often that happens. Like, if you've ever killed stuff that's worked, like, just drop me a quick, like, yeah, dude, drop me a thumbs up in the chat. Like, I know what you're talking about. I've definitely done that. I know I've done that. Like, I've absolutely killed stuff that has been working, and you don't want to kill stuff that's working because you don't have clarity. As a media buyer, this is going to allow you, Alfie said, wow, I'd never dream of doing that. As a media buyer, this is going to allow you to make calculated decisions versus what seems to be working is. If you're a media buyer and you've ever said like, what seems to be working is blah, 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 like, but you haven't been able to pinpoint down to the exact level of detail, it's because you don't have ad variable isolation in your campaigns. And obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, because I don't mean it in a condescending way. But then if you can understand and make database decisions from this testing process, like you're having complete control over your inputs and not giving up control to the platform. And like, honestly, guys, like this applies to TikTok too. Like we run this the same way on TikTok as well. So if you're wondering like, can this work for me? Or like, how do I even do this? What channels can I use this on? You can run this on, paid social with LinkedIn and TikTok as well, most of these principles. So here's what our 4-phase system looks like with what we call SVST testing and scaling. So you'll see on the right-hand side, this is a live screenshot from an ad account, phase 4, phase 3, phase 2, phase 1. I'm going to break that down on the next slide here as well. The benefits of doing this is, we now have this progressive decision-making framework that is not dependent upon audiences. Like, the reason that Facebook was so good for so long was that like the targeting was just freaking phenomenal, right? And now with all of this detailed targeting, or I should really say niche targeting, going away, we need to be able to honestly be better at marketing. Like we have to be better with our messaging. We have to be better with our creative, and you can still absolutely dominate and crush Facebook ads. But like, you need to identify what the best creative is through ad variable isolation so that you can put 70 to 80% of your budget behind it. Like, that's what this 4-phase system is you move through these phases, making progressive decisions from messaging to creative to audiences to scaling, so that you can put 70 to 80%. Let's just use an easy number, $10,000 a day. You want 7 to 8K a day in your scaling campaign. Maybe you have multiple scaling campaigns and you're just absolutely crushing it, right? You have to get, like, the thing that I find that most media buyers screw up like all the time is like their budget allocation is so mismanaged, because like so many campaigns are in learning limited and they're never able to generate the amount of conversions that they need to even get the consistent results that all of you guys are looking for. Like, this is pre-iOS and post-iOS. And so the whole scaling methodology, this is TikTok, this is Facebook, is to be able to set your budget appropriately using only your proven audiences, proven ads, proven creatives, proven offers, proven hooks, proven headlines. All of it is proven in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, so that when you get into scaling, like, you're just putting money behind stuff that just absolutely works, right? And so we've got like 5 different strategies that we approach with scaling. But one thing that I always tell everybody is like, there is no scaling without testing system. Like, if you don't have a testing system and this process detailed out like this, you are not scaling consistently. That's how we're able to, like, as media buyers on my side, my team, media buyers that we coach, that's how we're able to scale so fast, because we do all the work in phase 1 to phase 3. And then our budget allocation is just right on point with being able to scale quickly. And then we just start stacking all of this stuff on top of each other. So you need a testing system post iOS, and you need to use ad variable isolation with the way that you're running ads. All right, so key number 3. Key number 3 is sticking to the winning ad formula. This is a mental model philosophy that I almost like literally beat into at least my team's head for consistent results. And the problem is, like, when you let me back myself up real quick. New creative equals fluctuations in performance. And so when you stick to this philosophy or this mindset and this methodology of sticking to the winning ad formula, we are focusing on variations of winning ads 80% of the time. So when you're using this message testing framework and you're split testing 10 times the amount of volume through your ads, right? You're optimizing winning ads. You are protecting the 80% of what makes your ad, your campaign, your creative a winner. And you're optimizing the scroll frame, which is really what the prospect sees, right? Like, our goal as media buyers is getting attention. And so the problem is, as media buyers, we introduce a bunch of random shit into our ad accounts, right? Like, and randomness, newness equals fluctuation in performance. Still do that stuff. Still go test like the wild pie in the sky unicorn ideas that you have, but like focus 20% of your day-to-day spend on that stuff. Focus 80% of your day-to-day spend on optimizing winning ads. And what I mean by optimizing winning ads, it's like, go test new headlines on winning creative. Go test new headlines as text overlay on winning creative. Go test new hooks, which I'm going to get into message-driven targeting here in a second, to call out a different pocket of the audience where you're just simply like, quick sidebar. Think the physical fitness interest. This is an example that I use all the time. In the physical fitness interest, massive interest on Facebook, right? 100, 200 million, whatever it is now. Like, there's people in that audience that want to lose weight and people in that audience who want to build muscle. If you simply optimize your messaging and keep the remaining 80% intact, that is what it means to stick to the winning ad formula. We're not creating new randomness and new ideas. We're turning carousels into GIFs. We're turning GIFs into carousels. We're taking still images from winning videos. We're optimizing the thumbnail on winning videos. Like, that's how you day to day, if you're really crushing it and you master this process, your results will be so much more consistent because you're protecting the 80% of what is actually helping you scale, like not introducing all of these random things that could potentially work or could potentially not work. And so I'm a huge believer and advocate of sticking to the winning ad formula and being able to win your creative testing post iOS. And here's an example of that. Like, here's an example of what it means to stick to the winning ad formula and optimize the scroll frame. These are the same exact ad. And the only difference between these ads is like, we've completely optimized the scroll frame of this ad, like other winning hooks, other winning text overlays, other winning headlines, etc. And so we're not changing the fundamentals of what our winning ad formula has become for this brand or this account or what have you. And so the definition of the winning ad formula is all of these inputs that you have with your ad campaign and you controlling it, especially post iOS, because, and I'll touch on this in a second, how much more important your messaging is with targeting going away. And so when you master like the hook, the first line of ad copy, the ad text, your text overlay on your creative, your headline in your creative, your call to action button, your offer, etc., the type of creative, the winning elements to your creative, all of those are variables. But when you start to literally list out what is proven, what's working, you can replicate these winning ad creatives and you can continue to scale behind these ad creatives in a broad setup environment, which is what I'm going to touch on next. And here's an example of an ad that we've been running for like 15 plus months. This ad is still live, has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, and is still crushing it to this day. What is April? In April, and it goes all the way back to prior of January of 2021. So that's what it means to stick to the winning ad formula and optimize your winning ad formula, and not focus on creating. Okay, so here's probably one of the big keys overall is, there's a lot of talk out there on what exactly it means to go broad. Like, oh, everybody's saying going broad. All the gurus are saying going broad. Guys in ad leaks are like, oh, I'm going broad. Like, what does that even mean? And so the way that you go broad is, now remember, detailed targeting is being removed, right? And so the way to go broad is through message-driven targeting. And what that means is talking to your prospect through your ad copy, through your messaging, through your creative, by essentially calling them out. Downside is, depending the way that you want to look at it, this forces you to actually understand who your avatar is, what they want, what their pain is. And if you do that, you can run a broad setup. And so the definition of broad, within Facebook or within TikTok is simply like, for example, number one, for example, male, female, 18 to 65 plus, no interests, no lookalikes, open targeting, if you will, or no targeting. That's what it means to go broad. And it puts the pressure or the emphasis on your creative, on your messaging, where you're literally calling out this prospect through your ad creative, and you are less reliant on Facebook getting your ads in front of what it thinks are the best people, right? And so that's just one way to go broad. Other ways to go broad are like that physical fitness audience, massive audience, super broad interest, 10% buyer's audience, for example, super broad, very large audience. And again, putting the emphasis on your messaging, on your creative. Alfie just said, messaging skill equals scale. Completely agree, right? Like when you master the messaging post iOS, you will scale your accounts, like the examples like I've shared with you today. And that's why the 4-phased approach in the testing process and getting the clarity on what exactly is working is so important post iOS, is because we've lost some tracking capability and we've lost audience targeting capability. But if anything, honestly, like we're having better performance on Facebook now more than ever. And it's because we're huge believers in message driven targeting. Obviously we came up with the approach, but like it works, right? And that's like the biggest thing. All right, hold on, I got one more question in the chat. Brian says, think of broad as buying like traditional media buys on cable. Yeah, that's an example that I use all the time. Speak to the 20% in this broad audience. Like an example that I talk about a lot is like, I'm totally messed up this slide thing here. Sorry, I'll do this at the same time. Come on. Proof. Oh, wow, this is terrible. Come on. Okay, here we go. I got control back. One of the examples that I use all the time is like, imagine that you're watching CNN, NBC, or whatever, and you see one of these like pharmaceutical, like medication ads. I'm very open with a lot of people. My girlfriend has rheumatoid arthritis, and this example like always really hits me personally. Like you'll be watching TV and it'll say, hey, do you have rheumatoid arthritis and suffer from inflammation, psoriasis, fatigue, etc.? Like that is the root of message driven targeting. It's speaking specifically to the avatar within a broad setup. And what I want you guys to start thinking about is, how do I approach Facebook ads the way that marketers have forever been approaching TV? And so success is less dependent upon audiences in Facebook, and success is more dependent on how good you are at actual marketing, aka messaging. And so the idea here is, are you actually targeting the right prospects with your creative and with your ads based on the level of intent that they actually have? I see so many mistakes time and time again where marketers, media buyers, agencies, in-house marketers, however you want to summarize it, use super low intent ad copy that really speaks to a problem unaware person, which at the very top of the funnel, if you flip this pyramid upside down, is the lowest intent, lowest converting prospect. And the only way that this person could answer this question of, are you missing out on nature's most powerful superfood? I mean, I have no freaking idea. I'm completely unaware. I have no idea what you're talking about. Versus if you use copy and headlines like, these aren't your average mushrooms. Well, the only person that is going to resonate to in a broad setup is a solution aware person. I know that we all know about this aspect of problem aware, solution aware, most aware, but like media buyers F it up all the time. Like every one of you guys mostly F this up all the time. And it's like when we really stop to think like, who am I talking to? Like what level of awareness do they already have about this product? Like I don't want to educate markets with my ads. Like educating through marketing is super freaking, Charles said, definitely messed it up. I remember we had that chat, Charles, a couple months ago. When you think about this level of awareness, like I know you guys are familiar with this concept, but like we have to talk to people who have like higher level of intent, because we don't want to educate markets, because educating markets is so expensive. And unless like you're sitting on a couple million bankroll, which some of you might be, pending the structures of your companies, like you don't want to get into like this aspect of branding when you're trying to generate sales and ROI and lower your customer acquisition cost and all these things. Like you want to be focused on like the level of of awareness that is going to generate the maximum output for you. And so here's just another example of like bottom of funnel copy and messaging that you can run in a broad setup. These are the best immune boosting mushrooms. Well, the only person that is really going to apply to is someone who is already buying mushrooms, mushroom supplements, etc., and already knows what the benefits are. Like, we're not trying to convince them on what this can do for their life. We're just like simply, hey, these are the best ones. Here's the unique ingredient in this supplement that is going to give you the difference you can feel. The problem is, this is the smallest segment, of course, with most aware. And so just because you're labeling your top of funnel campaigns top of funnel doesn't actually mean you're reaching cold traffic. And I see this messed up time and time and time again, especially post iOS, because we have to think about the level of awareness. Almost think like, how can I use level of Google intent with my Facebook ads through my messaging so that I can still scale the hell out of this platform? Like, that's kind of a way that I like to kind of describe it, you know, to anyone, you know, that I'm, you know, communicating with. So that's message driven targeting. That's one of my favorite pieces here with how to scale and win creative testing post iOS. It's this message driven approach to running broad setups where like you just don't have any, like there's no limit, like there's no cap on this, because the only cap is how much you're willing to spend. Like, you're not limited by these audiences. You're only limited by your ability to produce messaging repeatedly. So hopefully that helps. Oh no, I just did the thing again. All right, let me try this again. Come on, let me get control back. All right, here we go. All right, sweet. Message driven targeting. So let's just sort of wrap up here. And then if anybody wants to stick around for questions, definitely willing to do that. Here's 3 other strategies that are going to help you win. Number 1, increase your message testing volume. Hopefully, I've made a pretty significant case for that today. Use this phase 1 message testing for insights before you run it for conversion. Test more headlines on creatives and ad setup. Test more hooks on creatives and with ad setup. Test more variations of winning ads. Text overlays on winning ads. Increase that message testing volume. I'm a big believer, and this is why we are able to win so much with our accounts, is we just test more than anybody else, and we have the clarity. And when we have that clarity, we have confidence. When we have that confidence, we can scale even post iOS. The last thing, or the next thing that I want to quickly touch on, is prioritizing the hook. Remember, like, you know, we talked about how do we go broad, message driven targeting. Talk to a specific person about something that they care about. No one will read, watch, or ad if the hook sucks. Like, we all kind of generally know this, but we also always need to be reminded of it, because it's going to show up in our CPC, and usually a high CPC is because of a bad hook. And with the lack of targeting, it's putting more priority on your hook now more than ever, because it's the only thing that you can appropriately call someone out with, is your hook, whether that's a visual hook, as we like to call it, or whether that's like a copy hook, your ad copy, your text overlay, etc. And so prioritize your hook with your testing, stick to the winning ad formula, keep the 80% intact of what is making your ad campaign, your creative, or your ad a winner, and focus on that scroll frame, that attention grabbing factor that is simply going to resonate with a different person within this broad setup. And the last thing is kill ad sets early. It's really important to have a clearly defined kill point because of delayed attribution, potentially modeled conversions up to 72 hours. Again, this assumes that you're using a third-party attribution like Heroes or Wicked. It also assumes that you're using Zapier to pull offline conversions back to the purchase event. And because of all of these things that are happening, we have to have a very clearly defined kill point that is not different each time. Emphasis on is not different each time. If you're a media buyer, what I would strongly recommend is being super disciplined in this area. around when you actually kill ads. If you're not super disciplined in this area, like you're wasting a ton of money on ads that either may or may not be working, or you're running stuff way too long. Move on and reduce the spend that you're wasting. This will keep overall CPA down. One of my general rules of thumb, and I have kill points personally of anywhere to 2 to 5 times cost per acquisition. But if you're running it super tight in your accounts, I'd recommend having a 2 times cost per purchase with no purchases. Like kill that creative test before it spends too much. Analyze it, maybe make one ad variable isolation adjustment, relaunch it if you're seeing some early funnel stats, CPM, cost per click, CTR, etc., of why you would want to run that again. So those are some other strategies here overall that are going to help you when you're creative testing. So how did I do? Would love, well, I know I ripped through that really quickly. Would love, if you would drop me a 1 to 5, in the chat. Simon says a 5. Thank you, Simon. Lexi 5. Thank you so much. Charles 5. Thank you so much. Want to make sure that this is valuable for you guys. Waylon 5. Thank you. Joseph 5. Thank you so much. Overall, no hard pitch here for you guys. If you want help with this, go to www.creativetestingmastery.com. Email me at will@elitemediabuyersacademy.com. Everything that we went over today, I teach media buyers how to become elite with their approach. That's what Elite Media Buyers Academy is all about. If you have an agency, if you're a media buyer, if you want this level of training, go to creativetestingmastery.com. Would love to have you guys check out the program. Again, feel free to email me, will@elitemediabuyersacademy.com. I'm going to stick around for questions. Feel free to unmute yourself or throw some questions in the chat. William Campos says 4.99. Thanks, Will. Appreciate it. Feel free to throw me those questions in the chat or, unmute. Like I said, happy to stick around and answer any of those questions. Don't be shy. I know people don't love chiming in with questions. Any questions? I'm going to put somebody on the spot. Okay, what's the website again? www.creativetestingmastery.com. That's for Will Campos.
I actually have one question, if I can jump in.
Joseph,
okay,
yeah,
so
fire away, man.
Appreciate it. So I was wondering if you guys are using, post IDs, ghost ads in some of these, or are you kind of using, dynamic retarget or dynamic creative optimization? What kind of setup are you using there?
Great question. I hate dynamic creative. We use dynamic creative in very select situations, typically during scaling when we've already proven out all these variables. So to answer your other part to your question, yes, post IDs all the time. So when you're running your creative testing in phase 2, typically, and one of the things I did not show you guys today is what's called a staging campaign, is building out all of your ads in a staging campaign, grabbing those post IDs so that all of your original ads are in one place. Then when those ads become proven in phase 2 creative testing, then when you go into scaling, you're just scaling, that spend and that reach, those impressions, that social proof, etc., on that original ad. And you also know where the original ad was. You don't want to lose track with where you built out the original ad. So we teach a lot of like naming convention systems, things like that as well, but no dynamic creative. Maybe use it in phase 4 scaling. Yes, on post IDs. Great question, Joseph. Really appreciate it.
Okay, but just really one quick follow-up. So when you put in like a story placement size, right?
Yep.
You square story and then the rectangle, it creates like a dynamic code, right? It doesn't let you get the post ID. I've looked for this and I've seen people say they were able to get the post ID with that. Have you been able to? Do you use, different placements for that
Yeah.
or sizes?
You know, no, honestly, like we run those on the original creative, and it's because of the social proof factor. So it's very intentional. I know that some people would like rather what's the word I'm looking for? Like adjust creative on specs for stories. But the nice thing is, like, even running the square format, you gain the actual your hook and headline in the actual story placement when you run the square format. And so the way that you would gain the post ID is by making sure that all of the placements are set to original. You know, I know that's like very detailed and nuanced, but like at the ad level, you don't want your ad set up to be customized per placement. So just make sure that the original creative is running across all placements, and then you'll be able to use the post ID.
Okay, makes complete sense.
Yep, good question. Anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, I just kind of want to follow up on that. So right now with some of my clients, we do run like all placements. However, we use different formats for in-feed versus story.
Yep.
So is that like something that you would recommend testing, is just keeping one format the same for both placements? Or
Yeah, exactly. I know that that is like very counterintuitive, and I know that there's probably some individuals' philosophies that would disagree with that. So fully willing to admit that. But if the idea is to be able to, the whole approach is based on scaling. And so to be able to scale, we need to reduce CPM through engagement. And when we reduce CPM through engagement, it's because we've stacked all this social proof on those ads. And then, you know, we're able to move those same exact ads into scaling and not lose the social proof on our ads. And the only way to do that, or at least I should say with 95% confidence, is that is to use the original post ID and to not customize the creative specs per placement.
Gotcha. Okay, so we currently just separate it just because of cropping issues.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think one thing that's important to keep in mind is like, and you might be doing this already, design everything for square 1080 by 1080. And that will limit, like, here's actually a good piece and reason to that as well. On top of funnel, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, we do not run audience network, right-hand column. So we're only running in top of funnel campaigns. We're not running auto placements. We're running feeds, feeds in stream video, reels, stories. I might be missing one. So like no Instagram Explorer, no Facebook Marketplace, no audience network, no Messenger, none of that. And that will minimize a lot of those issues with the actual creative,
Okay.
you know, like matching up for the placement.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
And the reason is you're not going to get conversions from audience network anyways. And the problem is like, you don't want Facebook, and I've seen this happen a ton. You don't want Facebook pushing a ton of delivery towards audience network and giving you this false hope of CPM being significantly lower than it actually is.
Right.
So yeah, great question. Anyone else have a question at all? Simon, I saw maybe you just unmuted yourself.
Hey, Will, it's Charles. I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
Sure. So a couple months ago, you and I talked. I took your advice about changing up some of the copy and whatnot.
Is it working?
It is not as good as I would hoped, but again,
Okay.
I'm doing it, not you.
Yeah.
I got the finance background, not the marketer. But I have a large repository of creatives and hooks and headlines and data that I've ran on them. If I'm going to go and take your model and how you do it, what do I do with all this past data? I mean, I got a couple hundred creatives and maybe half that of copy and hooks and headlines. How do I take that and put it into your system?
Yep, absolutely. Great question. Very good, detailed question. This is exactly what I would do. I would go find my 2 or 3 best winning images or videos. So let's just call it 1001. This is the naming convention we use. 1001, 1002, 1003. These are my 3 OG winning ads. And what I would do is I would go put these creatives into a phase 1 testing campaign, and I would test 1001 with 10 different headlines. Then I would test 1001 with 10 different hooks. And I would look for like, what are people actually gravitating towards? Because then once you find the 2 or 3 best winners in that testing environment, these can then become the headlines on the ad creative that was already a proven creative. And now we're keeping that winning creative going longer, and we're focusing more on optimizing our winning messaging, our winning campaign, our winning creative, and less on just more creative. That's how you ended up in that place, right? Like you just continue to develop creative, and now you've got this huge bucket of 400 creatives. Whereas like that example, the Chef V example, like we showed with you guys, like there's ads that we're still, there's like 4 or 5 ads that we're spending like 4, 5, 6 grand a day, like on, because we've optimized the hell out of the messaging on those ads. And like we're using one audience, we call it single ad scaling. And like, we just crush that audience, thousands of dollars a day. And the emphasis is on the messaging and the ad creative itself. So just to recap, I would find my 2 or 3 best winning creatives. I would go split test my messaging on those winning creatives. I'd find the 1 or 2 that work. I would then go put that into a creative testing campaign for conversions. I'd prove that out. Once it proves out, getting 10 purchases, I would then move directly into scaling on that. And I would go put my daily ad set budget at 3 to 5 times my target CPA. Let's say it's $50. So I would launch my daily ad set budget at 150 up to 450 a day. If my math is right, 250 a day. And I would start there and then work my way up with scaling it.
Cool. That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
And
pleasure.
it's funny, the 3 or 4 creatives that we have are winning are following the idea of the solution aware that you mentioned on the phone call. So I definitely appreciate it.
You're welcome, man. Absolutely. Anybody else have any questions that they want to touch on before we wrap up? All right. Speak now or forever hold your peace. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you guys sticking on here and checking this out and being a part of this masterclass. If there's anything I could do to help you, give me a shout. Feel free to start jumping off if you like. I'm going to hang on here just in case someone doesn't want to ask a specific question with everybody else on. So feel free to start dropping off, and have you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you soon.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah, pleasure, man. Thanks, Kyle. You're welcome, Lexi.
Hey, thanks, Will. I actually have a question for you, if I could ask.
Yeah, fire away, man.
I would deal with a lot of local brick and mortar businesses that have very limited budget structures, and we try to implement the same test at a very smaller scale. Have you found a different test or anything that you enact differently when it comes to, say, a geographically locked location, like some place in Southwest Florida with a limited budget structure? Do you find other tests to be more effective in sense of targeting than the actual hook and copy, or is it still the same implementation even when it comes to smaller budget, smaller location?
Yeah, same thing. It just means that you're gonna run, like, your creative is gonna fatigue faster, right? Like, if anything, there's more pressure on you to continue to produce new angles, because that the size of that audience might be, let's just say, 1 million, or in Miami, running it broad. But then if anything, you're going to have, versus anybody else, because you're running maybe local campaigns, is that there's even more emphasis on messaging for you, right? So you might say something like, attention all Miami homeowners, right? Like that is like the easiest way to approach message driven targeting. And the only person that's going to resonate to in a broad setup is someone who's a homeowner in Miami. More often than not, right? Like with 80% confidence. And so yeah, like you're still going to run your message testing, your hooks, your headlines, your text overlays on your creatives. You're still going to test those creatives in phase 2 and then get into scaling. And so when you're getting into scaling, it's more about, like, for you specifically in local lead gen, you're going to do more of what we would call single ad scaling. So like, you know, proving out the creative on lower budgets, $50 a day, then ramping it up to $250 to $500 a day, for example, on a winning ad, and allowing that ad to do the work for you. And you've proven out all of the elements of the copy, the creative, the headline, etc., within that setup. And then you're like, yeah, of course, I'm willing to put $500 a day behind this, for example.
Hey, we're finding exactly that. Thank you. One last question. Have you found any replacement for a strong copywriter in some of these AI tools like Jarvis?
Nope. Nope.
Yeah, neither have I. No, okay.
Yeah, no way. Yeah, no way. I wish, and we've tried them. I'm pretty fortunate that for myself, I have a copywriting background. So I was a journalism major back in college, and we spend a ton of time training around messaging and copy. And fortunate for me, within the agency side of the business, at least, I've got some pretty strong copywriters on my team. If anything, I prefer to hire copywriters and teach them media buying. So if I were you, like, and you needed to add to your team, like, I'd go find someone with strong copywriting skills with some media buying experience, and I'd train them on that.
Thank you. That's awesome advice. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. Cool. Adam is the last one to stick around. I saw Adam, you popped a question in the chat. Did you have any questions, or are we good to go?
Oh, no, I'm good, man. Really appreciate it. A lot of that, I think, affirms and then adds to some of what I've heard elsewhere. So no, I really appreciate the time, man. I sent you a follow-up on your email, just seeing if the recording's available. Either way, appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you for being here. It was great to connect, and let's definitely follow up.
All right, man. Thanks.
All right. Catch you soon.
All right.